Yeah, I'll react to that, sure. Huh? Hey guys, all right. I'm feeling a little rough. Let's just get right into it, all right? Original link to the video, top of the description. Hit all the things. If you're not ready to learn, get out. Let's go. Why did so many countries get involved in the Boxer Rebellion? History matters. Go.
It's no secret that in the late 19th century, the great powers didn't get along. It's no secret that in the late 19th century, the great powers didn't get along. Yet, these nations, despite their mutual distrust and rivalries, all worked together to suppress China's Boxer Rebellion at the turn of the 20th century. Which raises the question, why? Why did so many great powers work together despite the fact that they hated each other? So first, a brief overview. The Boxer Rebellion began in 1890. They hated each other. So first, a brief overview. The Boxer Rebellion began in 1899 and came about as a result of the Qing government's weakness against foreign colonial powers. These powers had received major concessions from the Chinese, including economic domination in several provinces, ownership of important ports, freedom to proselytize throughout all of China, and Europeans were also exempt from Chinese law. All of these were embarrassing for China, but the last two in particular were sore points for the Chinese people. It wasn't long until some of them took matters into their own hands and began to arm themselves and retaliate against foreigners in China against the wishes of the Chinese government.
Wait, so they couldn't, Europeans couldn't be held under
China
laws
and Europeans were also exempt from
and taxes?
Chinese law. All of these were embarrassing for China, but the last two in particular began to arm themselves and retaliate against foreigners in China against the wishes of the Chinese government. These rebels, who were known outside of China as Boxers because of their knowledge of martial arts, soon raised an army and laid siege to the foreign quarter of Beijing. In response, an international coalition of countries, mostly great powers, arrived to put down...
I did not know that. I didn't know that's why they were called Boxers. Wow, okay.
...the rebellion, which they did. So why did so many nations get involved, and why did they put aside their differences to do so? The first reason why all of these nations got involved was because their citizens were in immediate danger and many feared a bloodbath. There was a fear that the Europeans and Christians in China were going to be slaughtered. And so for the wider publics of the great powers as well as the churches in their countries, it was a moral imperative that these people be saved. The second reason was prestige. Having your people harmed wasn't just bad for them, but it also would have hurt a nation's international standing. The third reason was money, although in varying degrees for each country. The United States wanted China to open up to trade in the same way that Japan had done in the mid-19th century. Because for America, China was primarily a market for exports. Britain, France, Russia and Germany wanted to,
just like today,
maintain their monopolies and privileges in the parts of China that they had influence over. Japan's involvement was also about making it clear that China was in their backyard and that they wished to be treated as a great power equal to the others. Whereas Austria-Hungary's and Italy's motives were much more about Chinese coaling stations. These two didn't have any colonies of their own in Asia.
You know what's crazy? How people... It's like, it feels like, so this... The constant, pushing yourself into other people's part of the world, so to say, kind of Japan saying this. The more I learn about history, the more I kind of just throw up my hands at this. And I'm like, people who are stronger, have a stronger military, get things that other people who have a stronger military and have from them. Like, what I'm trying to say is that, like, we see the borders today, I guess, of countries as these static borders, but I mean, it seems like throughout all history, it's fair game to conquer whatever you want, as long as if you're stronger and can get them over with, and that's one of the big things I've come to learn is that we're still in history and borders change, and that's not to say that it's okay for a country to invade another country. But that's just sort of how things have been forever, right?
Motives were much more about Chinese coaling stations. These two didn't have any colonies of their own in Asia, and so to keep that part of the world open to them, they needed access to the neutral Chinese coaling for their own. In Italy's motives were much more about Chinese coaling stations. These two didn't have any colonies of their own in Asia, and so to keep that part of the world open to them, they needed access to the neutral Chinese coaling facilities. These were open to any country's ships, and so unlike those controlled by another imperial power, there was no risk of them being closed off. Italy had another reason, and that was that it didn't have any of the same privileges in China that the other European powers had. They had tried to get them earlier, but the Qing rulers told them no, and so if Italy was to be seen as an established power, it needed to obtain some. And so together they all fought to defeat the Boxer Rebellion. And you would hope that working together would create a sense of brotherhood between the nations involved to decrease tensions. But that's not how early 20th century great power politics worked, and just over a decade later, it was time for the First World War.
Another big thing I'm learning is just how consequential the First World War was. It seems like the Second World War gets all of the kind of love from people today, and I'm kind of partially, I'm part of that as well. I just see World War II as so fascinating, but the more I look at World War I, the more I'm becoming more of a World War I fan than I was a World War II fan, you know?
I hope you
just because of how much it changed. Oh, it's the end.
Enjoyed this episode with a special thanks to my patrons, James Bizanet, Kelly Moneymaker, Mr. Wolf, Sky Chappelle, Adam Stalter. Thanks to my later, it was time for the First World War. I hope you enjoyed this episode with a special thanks to my patrons, James Bizanet, Kelly...
Awesome video, awesome channel. Yeah, so the thing with the borders, like, so I want to talk about borders in World War One. I want to, because I'm really serious about the borders thing. And so people see for instance, you know, keeping Thanksgiving in mind, they see the conquest of the Americas as sort of more evil than the conquest of any other place. You know what I mean? And it's like, look, I'm not positive. Let me know if I'm being too brash or whatnot, but it just seems like it was another country conquering another country. You know what I mean? And although that can be terrible in many ways, and if there are atrocities, I don't, obviously, I'm not trying to give a, Jesus Christ. I'm not trying to say that every invasion and every conquering is equally terrible. No, there are degrees. But what I mean is that I think people tend to forget that this has happened forever, you know, and there is no civilization on Earth that has their hands clean of blood that didn't at one point conquer some place to get where they were. And so I don't want to put that too down, but at the same time, it gets at the forefront of my head now after learning so much about world history in the past, 8-10 months. And what was the other thing? You said it at the end.
Working together would create a sense of brotherhood.
Oh yeah, World War I. I'm fascinated with World War I. That's really all I have to say. And it seems like pre-World War I versus post-World War I might have been even more dramatic than pre-World War II to post-World War II. Maybe I'm wrong there, but that's my feeling as of right now. All right, see you guys next time.